Shut up and dance with me. My witty name. Chapter 14. Good luck. Recording. The screen turns on with the corner of Pidge and Hunk's apartment snapping into view. It starts out fuzzy before the lens adjusts, putting everything into focus. The TV is off, coffee table littered with papers and books and used cups. It leaves! Lance announces, voice off screen. The camera moves up and down the walls, shifting around the living room as he makes cooing sounds. It looks so good! Holy crow! He mumbles more to himself than anything else. Lance, what are you doing? Comes Pidge's voice, and the camera moves quickly, snapping across the living room to the hallway across the way, the one that leads back to their bedrooms and the bathroom. Pidge stands there, pajama pants pooling around their feet and baggy shirt hanging on their small frame. They stare at the camera, one eyebrow raised, expression flat, arms crossed over their chest. Are you recording me? Yep, Lance says cheerfully. This is the maiden voyage of this bad boy. Say cheese, Pidge! Instead of saying anything, Pidge lifts a hand, promptly flipping both him and the camera off. Lance laughs, camera shaking slightly. Now that's the pigeon I know and love! There's a visible fight to it, but in the end, Pidge can't help the small lopsided smile that cooks their lips. Just keep that camera out of my face, Lance, they say flatly, but there's a little bit of amusement there. I rob the viewers of your beauty! Never! Pidge rolls their eyes and strides across the room, throwing themselves down on the other end of the L-shaped couch and nestling into the pile of spare blankets and pillows that had been sitting there. The camera follows their progress before moving upward, pointing across the small kitchen table to the bar window that looks into the kitchen. Hunk and Keith are there, talking about something that the camera can't quite pick up. Hunk says something as Keith is drinking from a glass, and all at once his eyes go wide. He chokes back a laugh, bending forward, hand going to his mouth, but he can't quite stop the spray of liquid from his mouth. Hunk turns around to shield himself from it, and Keith stares at him in horror, already going to apologize. Then Hunk spins around, holding 2 cake pops to his eyes, and Keith throws his head back and laughs. The camera zooms in on him, focus fuzzing out for a second before snapping back to clarity. Hey, how about you two share the goods instead of goofing off? Lance calls, voice playful and light. Off screen, there's a soft snort of amusement, followed by Pidge's voice. Like you have any room to tell people not to goof off. The camera stays trained on Keith as he turns, blinking in surprise as he stares at the camera. His brows furrow, lips pursing into a little frown. Lance, are you recording? Yep! His frown deepens. Why? Why not? Lance fires back. Because we're not doing anything. We're hanging out, and you're pretty. I don't need any other reasons to want to capture this moment. The words are light and flippant, playful and teasing. Keith stiffens, lips pursing as his cheeks darken. He huffs and looks away, crossing his arms over his chest. Lance's chuckle shakes the camera at the edges. Hunk's chuckle echoes Lance's, and he moves past Keith in the kitchen. The camera zooms back out, moving to capture Hunk as he steps around the corner of the kitchen and into the living room. He carries a plate stacked with cake pops in one hand and a glass of milk in the other. And here he is, ladies, gents, and dudes of every preference, the man of the hour, the most beautiful person in all of existence, the love of my life, the wind beneath my wings. The camera centers on Hunk, but after a brief pause, it flicks to the side of where Keith walks out behind him, a glass of milk in one hand and 2 mugs of tea held in the other. Sorry, babe. Keith just rolls his eyes, a good-natured smile tugging at his lips. The camera follows them both as they make their way into the living room. Keith sets a mug of tea in front of Pidge, who immediately reaches for it and cradles it in their hands before he makes his way around the couch to sit next to Lance, setting the glass of milk in front of him. The camera shakes a little as he sits down and Lance readjusts. Hunk takes a seat in the bend of the couch, setting the platter on the coffee table. Hunk, these look amazing! Lance coos, zooming in on the plate. The camera whirls as it focuses on Hunk. What do you have to see for yourself? He says, tilting his head and scratching the back of his neck. I hope they taste as good as they look, he says with a wide, bashful grin. Hunk, you know they always taste even better than they look, Paige says, leaning forward to snatch up one of the cake pops. I've known you since we were kids, Lance says, camera angle drooping as he reaches forward to grab one for himself. And I can confidently say that your food gives me mouthgasms on the daily. Pidge groans, head lolling backwards, but Hunk chuckles, waving a hand at Lance, embarrassed smile on his face. Dude, stop. There's a pause, smile widening, and becoming smug as he says, nah, keep going. Lance laughs, his arm coming into view as he brandishes his cake pop in front of him. Behold my ode to Hunk's culinary skills! He clears his throat loudly, dramatically. No! Paige says, cutting him off. The camera turns to them as they wave their cake pop threateningly at the man behind the camera. Hunk chuckles off to the side. If this is anything like what you just said, I don't want to hear it. Keep control your boyfriend. He's a menace. There's a soft, breathy chuckle from off screen, and the camera is jostled slightly. Lance, stop scarring, bitch. The voice comes low and soft near the camera. There's an attempt to be stern, but there are playful undertones. Lance scoffs. As honorary big brother, it's my job to scar them. As childhood friend, it's my job to beat up anyone who harasses them. Keith shoots back. The camera, still trained on Pidge and Hunk, captures Pidge's small, lopsided grin. You think you can kick my ass, coconut? Lance says, voice dropping, words lifting at the edges. I know I can't, McLean. Pidge leans closer to Hunk, eyes trained on the two behind the camera, whispering loudly, the way we flirt is weird. Hunk just shrugs, reaching for a cake pop and looking it over with a critical eye. Do you really expect anything else? Pidge's face scrunches up for a moment, wheels behind their eyes turning, then they sigh, leaning back to their original position. Good point. Hey Lance, can I see your new camera? Hunk asks, eating his cake pop whole and speaking around full cheeks. Sure, buddy. The angle jostles as the camera passes between them. When it settles again, it's pointed across the room, aimed at the window. In the corner of the screen, Lance sits on the couch, legs propped up on the coffee table, one foot encased in a walking boot. Keith sits next to him, feet pulled up onto the couch, leaning into Lance's side. Lance's arm drapes over the back of the couch and around Keith's shoulders. There's a long, low whistle, screen shaking a little as Hunk looks it over. This is super cool, dude. I know, right? Lance says, grinning at them, taking a bite of his cake pop before waving it at the camera in a big gesture. My whole family pitched in to buy it. I think it's supposed to be a get well soon kind of thing, since I can't actually dance at regionals. I think it's kind of a pity gift, but I'll take it. I'm gonna get some great footage of your performances. Hey, Pidge, check out these settings. Hunk mumbles and the camera angle tilts, twisting to the side as he leans over toward Pidge. In the corner of the screen, Lance watches them, beaming with pride. While he's not paying attention, Keith leans over, closing his mouth over the end of his forgotten stick and pulling off the rest of his cake pop. Lance jumps, making an indignant squawk, and turns to gape at him. Keith's eyes glint with mischievous amusement, corner of his lips tilting upward as he chews. Glaring at Keith, Lance leans forward for another one and makes a point to eat it as far away from Keith as he can. Can I see it? Pidge asks. The camera's angle changes again, shifting as Hunk says, sure, and passes them the camera. The angle twists, mostly pointed down, but catching glimpses of Keith and Lance fighting over cake pops, progressively getting more and more physical, and Keith eventually resorting to grabbing Lance's side. Lance squeals as Keith tickles him, and Keith uses that moment to snatch his cake pop away. Ew! Lance hisses. Keith just grins, tossing the stick onto the table. When's Corinne coming to pick us up tomorrow? Hunk asks, reaching forward for another pop before leaning back into the couch. The camera steadies, lifting to point at him. He said he was picking the van up around 6 and he'll be here around 6:45 after picking up the others. Pidge says. There's a collective groan. So hurry up and eat so we can go to bed. I know I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight, Hunk says, sinking lower on the couch. Pidge scoffs. And you think I will? This is like 5 hours before my usual bedtime. Don't you mean 7? Keith says, and the camera swivels to point at him and Lance. Keith's smirk is small, but it lifts at his eyes. Shut up, Gogane, and if I hear you two doing anything on our couch, I will come out here with Josephine and beat you both. Josephine? Lance asks, one eyebrow raised as he turns to Keith. Keith just returns the look blandly, shrugging his shoulders. That's the name of the bat that Pidge has holed up in their room. Hunk says offhandedly, sipping his milk. They bedazzled it and everything. She's beautiful, and she's for the emergency situation of a break-in. The camera zooms in just a fraction. Our friends defiling our couch. Keith scoffs and looks away, lips burst, a light flush on his cheeks. Lance just grins. The bonuses, he says with a wink. Ah! Lance laughs. I'm turning this off and taking it away from you for the night. His laughter dies immediately, mouth dropping open as he sits up straighter. What? I'm confiscating it for the night, so you stop messing with it. You'll get it back in the morning. Pinch! And recording. Recording. The camera focuses in on Lance's face, eyes bright and grin wide. As soon as it starts up, his grin settles into something more suave, something more relaxed and cocky. He's sitting in the passenger seat, a tall canvas seat behind him. He settles back, one hand holding up the camera, the other elbow propped up on the car door. The lighting is dark. The world outside the window is gray. Details are lost in the shadows. A dim yellow light from somewhere above is his main source of light. The occasional street lamp casts him briefly into sharp relief. What's up? Lazy Lance here! He shoots a finger gun at the camera, complete with a wink, before letting his hand drop. It is currently 6:55 a.m. The gang's all here, crammed up into a van that Karan rented, and we're on our way to regionals! He leans away from the car door, tilting the other way in his seat and keeping the camera pointed at him as he turns. Karan appears behind him, sitting behind the wheel. Say hi, Karan! Lance says, face in the edge of the frame as he tries to put Karan into focus. The man turns briefly, catches sight of the camera, and then turns a little more fully, flashing a bright grin that has his mustache lifting. Hello, he says cheerfully, lifting a hand in a little wave before turning back to the road. Who are we saying hi to? He asks, a pinch of confusion entering his tone. Lance shrugs. Not sure. Our future selves? Our children? Whoever sees it on the internet? Some future alien who finds it while rummaging through the rubble of our civilization thousands of years from now? Well, in that case, Karan shifts, holding up a hand in a Star Trek salute. Hello, future aliens. We come in peace. Or rather, I suppose we died in peace. I hope it was peaceful. Though given that you're finding this in a pile of rubble, I suppose not. He shrugs, putting his hand back on the wheel. Not that I'm too surprised. We had a good run. Are we leaving message for aliens? Hunk's voice sounds from somewhere off-screen, soft and muffled, sluggish with sleep. Yep! The camera swivels away from Lance, pointing between the two front seats to face the rest of the van. The light from the front overhead lights fades, leaving the last row in deep shadows, but the rising gray light from the rising sun is enough to make out the 6 muffled japes, wrapped up in blankets. 3 of them sit on the middle row and 3 in the back. The camera points to the seat behind Karan, where Hunk is sitting up, blanket pulled on his lap, lazily rubbing one eye as he gazes at the camera blankly. Say hello to the aliens, Hunk! Hi, aliens, he says, waving his free hand, words slurring slightly. He yawns widely. I'll leave a list of recipes later so you can try some native Earth food, or like, as close to it as you can replicate with alien ingredients. He scratches his chin where the shadow of stubble is growing. What if there are alien overlords? In that case, good luck with us. Humans are a handful, Lance says. Especially you, Hunk says, sinking a little further in his seat, pulling a knee up to rest against the window, pulling his blanket further up his chest. I'm more than a handful, if you know what I mean, Lance says, tone playful and suggestive. Hunk gives the camera a bland look before he groans, head tilting to the window, blanket being pulled up beneath his chin. Gross, dude. Lance laughs softly, and the camera angle slides to the seat next to him, where Shiro and Allura are curled up together. Her head is rested on his shoulder, leaning into his side. Shiro's legs are thrown up over her lap, arms resting around her lazily. Both of them are fast asleep, lips parted slightly, chests rising and falling rhythmically. And there's Shiro and Allura, Lance says, voice a loud whisper. Fast asleep and grossly adorable. I'm pretty sure Allura is drooling into Shiro's shirt, so good luck with that future, Shiro. The camera lifts, points further back to where the shadows are thickest in the back of the van. There are 3 huddled lumps there, each of them indistinguishable from the rest. Say hi, man! The lump to the right shifts, a hand lifting and waving lazily before falling back down. The blanket shifts, revealing a messy mop of hair. Bitch! Lance calls out. A hand rises from the middle lump, middle finger raised. Eloquent, as always. Keith, say hi, babe! The lump to the left shifts, blankets being pulled up higher as the body beneath readjusts.
Fuck off, Lance,
Comes the reply muffled and muted beneath the blanket, words slurred with exhaustion.
Lance chuckles. Isn't he a charmer, folks?
Keith lifts a head to flip him off side by side with Paige. The camera turns, swinging past Corinne and pointing out at the road ahead. The horizon is still in the process of lightening, chasing away the darkness.
So here we are, officially on the road to regionals, with 6 sleepy lumps in the back.
The camera turns again, pointing across the front seats so both Corinne and Lance are in the shot. Lance leans an elbow on the center console, grinning as he gestures to Corinne with a thumb.
And Lancey Lance and Corinne and gorgeous man kicking it up front, keeping this party alive as the sun rises.
Corinne leans over a fraction, eyes on the road, but tilting his head to speak to Lance.
I promised them an hour and a half of the music, but once that time is up.
He glances at the camera then, eyes sparkling, crinkling at the edges with mischief. He winks.
All bets are off.
Lance laughs. And recording. Recording. The screen snaps on, focused on Lance's face on one side of the frame. The angle shifts, Lance holding it close to the window, so Corinne is captured in the shot as well. It's much brighter now, early morning sun shining in and casting them in a warm glow.
They're both grinning, eyes crinkling with mischief. What time is it, Corinne?
Lance asks.
I do believe it's 8:30, Lance.
Corinne says, chipper as always, informative but with an
excited undertone. Does that mean the music band is officially over?
Corinne glances at the camera.
Enlightening. Why, yes, my boy, I do believe it does.
The camera angle shuffles, tilting and shifting as Lance sets the camera up on the front of the dash. His face is big on the screen as he makes adjustments. When he pulls away, the camera remains stationary. He and Corinne are in the edges of the frame, the back of the van taking up the center of the shot. With the new light, the curled-up bodies can be seen clearer. Hunk's head is tilted back, snoring softly, mouth open. His blanket has fallen around his waist. Allura has shifted back, head curled up against her headrest, legs pulled up and tossed across the seat until her feet rest in Hunk's lap. Shiro curls up next to her, half lying down with his face in the blankets on her lap. The 3 forms in the back seat are hunched and shapeless beneath their blankets. The van is in silence for a moment, with nothing but snores, soft breathing, and the hum of the road. Lance and Corinne exchange looks. Then Corinne turns back to the road, smiles
still on his face,
while Lance turns to the camera. He holds up his phone, wiggling it in view. The auxiliary cable trails out of it, disappearing to where it connects to the radio beneath the car.
Ready, Corinne? My boy, I was born ready.
There's a brief pause, and then a heavy beat starts, followed immediately by the unmistakable rhythm of
Sexy and I Know It.
It's loud, blaring from the speakers all around the van.
Hunk and Allura wake with a start,
both of them jerking as they sit up straight, blinking blearily around the car as the beat bounds. Shiro is jostled awake as Allura moves and lifts his head slowly, wiping drool from his chin as he looks around, looking dazed and confused. There's a chorus of groans from the back seat as the lumps begin to move. Everyone is awake by the time the lyrics start. Lance and Corinne sing loudly, dancing as best they can while confined to their seats, complete with dramatic facial expressions and poses. Lance. Keith groans loudly from the back seat. Lance! Paige joins in louder. Allura's sigh is loud and exasperated as she rubs her eyes. Corinne! Hunk groans and pushes his face against the window. Shiro collapses back down to Allura's lap, running his fingers through his hair. Matt shifts a little straighter, still wrapped in his blanket cocoon. He leans heavily into Paige, singing along loudly, voice thick and words slurred with sleep. Paige shoves him and he laughs, falling back against his window. Lance ignores them as the beat begins to drive forward with the chorus. He whips around dramatically to face the back of the van just in time to say, I'm sexy and I know it! Paige hurls a small pillow at him and Lance yips! It hits him as he pulls back, skidding off his face to hit the camera. And recording. Recording. The camera turns on, immediately jostling and shaking as Lance's face blurrily appears in the shot. When he leans back, the camera is once again placed on the center of the dashboard. His grin is wide, lips moving to lyrics as he sings, voice blending in with everyone else's. The music is loud, the energetic beats of hand clap blaring through the speakers. The camera shakes slightly as everyone in the car bounces. Karan dances as best he can while driving, eyes locked on the road ahead as he performs with expressions in one hand. Lance goes hard in the passenger seat, entire body getting into it as he performs for the camera, acting like a solo singer on stage. In the middle seat, Hunk, Shiro, and Allura play off one another, singing to each other and mimicking each other's dance moves. Pidge and Keith are reluctant to join, but Matt's constant enthusiasm finally encourages them. As the beat hits halftime, music slowing as the lyrics persist, all of their arms go into the air and the view of the band becomes a jumble of arms moving in slow motion at all angles. Then the beat drops and it's a flurry of movement again. Movement, loud singing, laughter, bright smiles. I call dibs on next song, Pidge calls out as the song ends. The next song starts up, but Lance turns the volume down low as he scrolls through his phone. What you want, Pidge? He calls back to them without looking up. It's a surprise. Switch places with me. Lance lifts his head, turning to look back at them. What? Switch places with me, they repeat. There's the sound of a seatbelt unbuckling. Come back here and be gay or whatever and let me have shotgun. Aw, Pidge, you're enabling our day, Lance coos, putting a hand to his chest and fluttering his lashes. Oh, shut it and get back here. Pidge, are you seriously? Matt starts cut off as Pidge shoves their blankets at him. Okay, yep, they're serious. But the car is moving, Hunk says. If we're going to be doing this, I recommend doing it quickly, Karan says, glancing over to where Lance is already unbuckling his seatbelt with a slight frown. Find your new seats and buckle in. Doing it, sir, Lance says, giving him a mock salute before reaching out to grab the camera. The frame whirls as it moves quickly. Hey, Hunk, hold this for me. Lance, don't. The camera spins, stopping abruptly before pointing at the floor. It straightens slowly, lifting until Shiro and Allura come into focus, with Lance squeezing between the two front seats. Don't just throw it, Lance! I knew you'd catch it, buddy, he says, flashing Hunk a bright grin. Shiro's brow furrows. Lance, what about your leg? Lance waves him off. It's fine! Just be careful. Lance, Keith says, and it sounds like a wary warning. Lance's movements get awkward and he yelps as he trips, losing his balance and falling into Shiro's lap. He grabs him, holding him up and keeping him from falling as Lance carefully maneuvers his legs from between the two front seats, brows furrowed and tip of his tongue sticking out, pressed against his upper lip. Shiro then helps him shift, ending up pushing Lance temporarily into Allura's lap. He settles quickly, leaning back and throwing an arm around her shoulders. He gives her a sly grin, waggling his eyebrows. Well, hello there, princess! She rolls her eyes, a smile on her lips, as she shoves him, nearly knocking him to the floor. He gasps, clutching at her to keep from falling. Heads up, Shiro! Pidge says, already shoving their way over the back of the middle seat. Be careful, Pidge, he says, leaning toward Allura and Lance as Pidge wedges between him and Hunk. I'm always careful, they scoff, clambering over the middle seat like a monkey. Shiro ends up half leaning, half being shoved into Lance's space, head pressed against his chest. Lance gasps loudly and dramatically. Shiro, please! I'm dating your brother! Shiro rolls his eyes, smiling good-naturedly. Pidge moves past him, slipping easily between the two front seats to slip into the passenger seat. Shiro straightens. And you're in my girlfriend's lap. Touche! Lance says, putting his hands on the back of the seat. Help me over! Hunk keeps the camera trained on them as they go through a three-man operation of getting Lance into the back seat. Shiro and Allura help get him up and over, being careful as they lift his booted foot, and Keith catches him on the other side, pushing him toward the empty middle spot. There are a lot of elbows and knees, groans of protest. Finally, they all get settled, and the camera moves to focus on the back seat as Lance throws an arm around Keith's shoulders. Hey, babe! Miss me? Keith gives him a flat stare, but his lips are quirked, and he leans into Lance anyway. I wish I could say it was quiet without you, but your voice carries. I wouldn't want to deprive you of my voice, he says, smirking as he leans in. Keith rolls his eyes, but leans into him, eyes fluttering closed as their lips meet. The kiss is sweet and short, but all of them coo loudly and unanimously with the chorus of ahs. Lance laughs into the kiss and Keith flips off Unc with the camera. All right, enough with the gay, Paige says from the front seat. It's time for the best road trip playlist ever! The camera, still focused on Keith and Lance, catches Keith's widening grin as he leans away from their kiss. His eyes are wide, crinkling at the edges. Lance leans back and stares at him for a moment, brows furrowing and lips pursing in confusion. Then his mouth falls open, eyes widening as he whips around, hands falling on the seat in front of them. Bitch, no! He shouts. Keith laughs as the singular, recognizable piano note comes from the speakers, followed by more. Bitch, yes! Matt says from Lance's other side, tossing his head back as he laughs. Lance groans, dropping his forehead to the back of the seat in front of him. Hawk chuckles, continuing to record as Paige, Keith, Allura, and Matt dance wildly and energetically to Paige and Keith's old emo road trip playlist. When Lance stops groaning, he sits back, arms crossed over his chest. The camera catches the fond look on his face and the soft look in his eyes as he watches Keith toss his head and sing. And recording. Recording. The screen jostles as it turns and lifts, settling with Lance in the center of the frame, from the shoulders up, hair mussed and messy, eyes bright and smile wide. One arm is outstretched at the side of the frame to hold the camera. So, we're officially here! I would have gotten more footage in the car, but they took the camera away from me. A mop of orange-brown hair pushes into the frame, half of Matt's face showing up and shoving into the shot. His eyes crinkle with a smile that's just off screen. He passed out and drooled all over Keith's shoulder. It took like 5 minutes to wake him up when we stopped for lunch. Anyway, Lance says, shoving Matt out of the frame. His laughter can be heard as he moves away. Lance frowns at him, but then turns back to the camera with a smile. As I was saying, we're here! We made it to regionals! The camera spins quickly, then slows, showing a large building in the center of the frame. The building is across a parking lot, rising in the distance. Cars and people are everywhere, moving toward the building. There it is! Lance says, and the camera moves slowly, capturing the city around them. The others are signing in right now, and Corinne is rounding up all the others from Altea to make sure they all get signed in too! And we're on car duty, Matt says, and the camera lowers to put him in the center of the frame. He stands a few feet away from the car. The camera is on a level that implies that Lance is sitting on one of the van's seats, slide door open wide. Matt grins as the camera lands on him. He has a bag of some sort in one hand. Yeah, well, I wasn't exactly looking forward to navigating the sign-in crowd with a boot anyway, Lance says, bitter amusement in his voice. Yeah, you can say that again. There are a lot of people here. Matt spins on his heel, turning to face the building and throwing his arms out to gesture to everything around them. Despite the crowd of people in the distance, they're in their own little pocket of peace. Lance makes a noise of agreement, and Matt spins back, reaching into his bag and pulling out a small, round snack. He pops it into his mouth, smiling devilishly at Lance. He'll be fine. The camera shifts as Lance sits up straighter. Who? He asks, carefully. Matt's smile is knowing as he lifts his chin. Keith, he says casually. I'm not worried about Keith, Lance says automatically without a trace of doubt. Oh, I know, Matt says, casually shifting his weight and idly spinning on his feet, the movements of a man unable to stand still, but there's nothing anxious about the motions. They're lazily and idle. But that doesn't mean you don't want to be there for him. Of course I want to be there for him, Lance says, and the camera shuffles a little. When he speaks again, it's hesitant, softer. He's nervous. I just want to be there. For him. With him. Whatever. Matt is grinning even as he leans forward a fraction and coos. Aw, that is so gay! Shut the fuck up, Matt! Lance snaps, but it's playful and without heat. He laughs as he says, Of course it's gay! I suck his dick! Matt laughs long and loud, the suddenness of it having him bend at the waist, free hand propped up on his knee to keep from falling over. I'd say TMI, but I think we all know that at this point, he says as he stands wiping the corner of one eye, grinning. Okay, but enough about what your mouth could do, and let's talk about mine. Lance snorts off screen. You still recording? Yep! Alright, watch this. He takes one of the snacks from his bag and tosses it high into the air, tilting his head back and expertly snatching it out of the air with his mouth. He's smiling as he lowers his chin, staring at the camera as he chews. He winks, shooting finger guns with his free hand.
All right, I'm mildly impressed, Lance says with a low whistle. Okay, but I bet you can't do it 10 times in a row. You're one. Matt continues, each time throwing a piece high in the air, watching it with calculating eyes as he watches it fall, catching it easily with his mouth. After 10, he takes one step back, throwing his arms wide as he gives a dramatic bow. Lance is laughing, the sound of his free hand slapping at his leg. Thank you, I'll be here all night, Matt says, straightening as he waves and blows kisses to an invisible audience around them. The camera jostles as Lance stands up. Okay, my turn, he says, and the camera frame points at the ground, catching sight of Lance's feet as he hobbles forward. He walks without crutches, but his gait is lopsided with the walking boot hampering his movements. Here, take the camera! The frame moves away from his feet, new ones entering the frame as Matt takes the camera. By the time the movement stills, Matt is standing several feet away from Lance, back to the van. Lance stands in the center of the frame, Matt's snap bag in one hand and the other on his hip. His weight leans on his good leg, hip cocked to the side as he smirks. All right, time for a real show. Go ahead, Matt says from off-screen, amusement in his voice. Show me up, Casanova. Gladly, Lance says, cocking his head to the side, smirk widening as he reaches into the bag. He hefts the snack in his hand a couple times before tossing it up in the air. It goes high, and Lance tilts his head back, shifting to the side as he watches. It lands cleanly in his mouth, and he lowers his head, grinning victoriously as he chews. A second later, the smile disappears, face twisting in disgust, nose scrunching, and lips curling as he chews. Oh, God! He says, forcing himself to swallow, one hand going to his throat as his shoulders hunch. What are these? He coughs, eyes watering at the corners as he obviously runs his tongue to the roof of his mouth to rid himself of the taste. I need water! The camera's angle drops as Matt laughs, showing the concrete of the parking lot and Lance's legs. Wasabi peas? Matt, what the heck? They're good, he jokes out between laughs. They are not! You're just a wimp. I am not a stranger to spice, but come on, Matt, these are gross! Matt just laughs, camera angle shaking as it points more towards the ground. Get me some water, you jerk! And recording. Recording. The image snaps into place with a glare from the sun, a blue sky glittering behind it. As the frame lowers, trees come into view. Beyond the sanctity of trees rise buildings, some old in architecture and style, while others stand tall and square, lined with sleek windows. The trees are all shades of green, yellow, and orange, changing with the autumn weather. As the ground comes into view, the grass around the stone-paved walking paths are coated in fallen leaves. The park is full. People travel in groups, in couples, and alone. They lounge in hammocks between trees, on the grass, on benches. They walk the pathways, no one in a hurry, everyone at ease. The camera moves slowly, capturing everything, the atmosphere, the scenery. It then swirls, turning around quickly, and Lance is suddenly in the frame. His eyes are bright in the late afternoon sun, despite the bags starting to form beneath his eyes. He grins, as he tends to do when the camera is pointed at him. The camera angle wobbles slightly, a strange rhythm, but consistent, correlating with the way his gait is lopsided when he walks with his boot. Every other step, the frame jerks a little, his shoulders lurching just a bit. We're at a park, he says cheerfully, announcing it perhaps louder than necessary with the camera so close to himself. There's an amused snort off-screen, followed by Keith's low, lazy drawl. I think that much is obvious, Lance. Keith turns to the side, pout forming on his lips, but his eyes are still smiling. Shut your face, Keith! I'm narrating this video! There's no audible answer, but Lance's smile slowly melts back onto his face. When he looks back to the camera, there's a fond gleam in his eye. Anyways, we're at a local park, like a 5-minute drive from the regional's auditorium. Matt and I found it while looking around for a place to eat, and we decided to check it out, he says, looking away from the camera to look around. It's really pretty, but pretty crowded. The gang's all back together. He turns to the side again, throwing his free arm out, smiling as he says, Keith, come over here! Not while you have the camera on, comes the flat reply. Lance's shoulders hunch, camera drooping a fraction. He tilts his head, pushing his lips into an exaggerated pout. Keith! He whines. Please! He holds the pout for a few seconds longer before his whole face lifts, back straightening as he does. Keith suddenly moves into the frame and Lance shifts the camera to better position the both of them together in the shot. His arm drapes around Keith's shoulders with a smoothness and ease that comes with familiarity, and it's with that same familiar ease that Keith slides into place at his side, standing tall on his own but leaning ever so slightly into Lance. The camera is held high, angled down just enough to catch the movement of Keith's arm easily and automatically sliding into place around Lance's waist. Hand resting on his hip, fingers idly curling into his belt loop and fiddling with it. Keith stares at the camera with a flat expression, disgruntled around the edges. His lips are pursed into a small frown, bordering on a pout. His thick brows are pulled together, looking uncomfortable to have the camera pointed at him.
And here's my lovely and beautiful boyfriend, Keith Goganay, my moon and stars, light of my life, wing beneath my wings,
Lance says, leaning his head to the side to bump his against Keith. Keith's frown lessens, corners of his lips threatening a smile, eyes hinting at his struggle to keep it down.
I thought that was hunk.
Lance's face turns thoughtful, lips pursing outward as he thinks. His eyes drift beyond the camera ahead of them, and slowly he nods, inadvertently rubbing his head against Keith's.
True, but what hunk doesn't know won't hurt him,
he says, a small smile coming back as he turns his head, nuzzling his nose into Keith's cheek, causing Keith to snicker, eyes squeezing shut as he pulls away just a fraction, smile finally breaking loose. Lance presses a kiss to Keith's temple, smiling into it. As soon as he pulls away, Keith nudges him with his shoulder, causing them both to sway to the side.
Stop being mushy on camera.
Lance snorts, rolling his eyes as a playful smirk tugs at his lips. Oh, we've definitely done worse on camera! Keith makes a surprised, strangled sound, eyes widening and lips parting before he snaps his jaw shut. Color creeps up Keith's cheeks. He purses his lips and turns to the side, partially hiding his face as he looks like he's gazing out around the park. Lance chuckles, leaning in to loudly whisper in Keith's ear. Did you ever get pitched to save that video?
No,
Keith says quickly, indignant, slightly exasperated. His breast pinch and he refuses to turn back. Lance leans in closer, dipping his head enough to press his nose to Keith's neck.
Guess we gotta make another one then,
he says, voice low and husky.
Lance,
Keith says, head whipping around to face Lance. Lance pulls back in time to avoid being hit, grins spreading his lips, eyes lidded and sparkling with amusement. Keith glares at him, lips parted slightly, shock widening his eyes, raising his brows, opening up his expression.
What?
Lance says, voice dripping false innocence. He tilts his head, smirk lightening.
Are you opposed to it?
He asks, slow and knowing. The color high on Keith's cheeks darkens slightly. His brows pinch, lips pursing.
That's not the point,
he says stiffly. Lance laughs, bright and open, and Keith's face visibly relaxes, fondness leaking into his eyes, softening the edges, easing his frown into the hint of smile. The camera turns, pausing when it faces ahead of them. The slight wobble with every other step is still there, but it's eased as Lance leans into Keith. The camera points off to the side of the path to the right. Shiro and Allura walk hand in hand, leaning close as they talk, Allura pointing out things she sees, Shiro's smile as he turns to look at her.
There's the parents, being gross as always,
Lance says. The camera moves to the other side of the path. Hunk and Karan walk next to each other, not too far away. Hunk has his phone out, clearly looking at it and talking with his other hand. Karan has a map half unfolded in his hands.
There's Hunk and Karan. Last I heard they were debating where to have dinner. Karan has some favorite places, but Hunk wants to try something new.
The camera moves again, pointing off the path. Beneath the trees, walking through the grass, is Matt. Pidge is perched on his back, arms lazily dangling over his shoulders and gesturing wildly as they talk. Both of their expressions are bright and open, relaxed and comfortable.
And there's the Nerd Twins!
The camera shifts suddenly, focusing straight down the path to where it spreads out into a wide circular area surrounded by benches, a fountain rising in the center, and where several other paths come together.
Oh, Keith, look!
Lance says, walking a little faster. They stop when they reach the little park square, and the camera focuses on the fountain as Lance walks around it.
This reminds me of our place back home,
he says thoughtfully, almost wistfully.
It really does.
Hunk says, and the camera lowers from the fountain to settle on him. The others are there, gathering in a section of the square that's less busy, nestled between two pathways with barely any foot traffic. It would be so fun to have a dance day here, Allura says with a wistful sigh, and the camera slides to the side to where she's holding onto Shiro's arm, leaning into him to place her head on his shoulder. It was fun the couple times we managed to go out with you guys, Shiro adds with a genuine smile.
Yeah, too bad we don't have our speakers,
Pidge says, pout on their lips as they slump on Matt's back, chin resting on his shoulder. Well, actually, Matt says, letting go of one of Pidge's legs to dig into his pocket. He pulls out a thin black rectangle. His smile is sheepish. I know it doesn't look like much, but trust me, I built it myself. All the volume of your usual amp, but easier to carry.
Matt, you're a genius!
Pidge exclaims, shooting up straight and clamping their hands down on his shoulders. It throws them both off balance, and they nearly topple over before Hunk moves automatically behind them. He catches Pidge and stops Matt from falling, lowering Pidge to the ground. The camera angle moves, slowly roving over the crowd on the other side of the fountain and on the paths and grassy areas beyond.
I wonder how many of these people are here for regionals,
Lance says thoughtfully.
What do you say we find out?
The camera moves back to Pidge, who's grinning crookedly, head tilted up at the camera. They lift their hands and wiggle their phone in one hand and Matt's portable speaker in the other, a cable connecting them. Lance moves to sit on the lip of the fountain, positioning the camera in his hand so it's pointed toward the space they make in front of him. Matt holds the phone and speaker, hitting play on a song that's one of his more recent remixes. Pidge starts off the dance circle and they're kicked out not long after by Hunk. They set the pace, everyone in their group taking turns jumping into the circle, dancing to whatever song happens to play next on Pidge's phone. The phone and speaker are passed throughout the group as they take turns jumping in. It's lighthearted and fun, none of them taking it particularly seriously. Coran warns them not to injure themselves, earning a dry sarcastic laugh from Lance. He holds the camera, capturing it all. The frame shakes slightly when he dances in place despite his efforts to hold it still. A crowd gathers, and there are several others who jump into the circle. Everyone laughs, bright smiles on their faces, enjoying the moment. Strangers and friends brought together through their love of dance. Even Matt jumps into the circle, doing an impression of a robot that's hilariously clunky and cliche. Pidge leaps in to join him, and they create a performance together. When Keith takes to the circle, he's not pushed, nor is he forced. He leaps in, dragging a foot behind him as he slides up behind Pidge, who laughs as they allow themselves to be danced out of the circle. Then he turns, pinning his gaze just above the camera, on Lance. He smiles, eyes lidded and smirk playful. He dances effortlessly, dynamic pulls, quick tilts of his chin and head, flipping his hair, rolling his body before going through more kinetic motions. It's playful and daring, casually seductive, if only because of the look he gives Lance, eyes never really leaving him. Lance lets out a loud wolf whistle as Keith bends, laughing gleefully as Keith pops his hips. Then Keith is moving forward toward the camera, body covering the entirety of the frame as he moves in close. Then the camera is moving, shot tilting and shaking. When it straightens, the angle is different, having been passed off to someone else. It focuses on where Keith pulls a surprised Lance to his feet, grinning wide as he walks slowly backwards, tugging him along by his hands. The camera follows them, keeping them centered as they reach the center of the circle. "Keith!" Lance says, voice low and barely caught by the camera's microphone. His expression looks strained, brows pinched and lips thin as he presses them together. There's a tenseness in his shoulders, a stiffness with which he holds himself, poised leaning slightly away from Keith. He glances around the circle, head tilted downward, biting at his lip. "I can't," he says, putting emphasis on the word that's strained and heartbreaking. Keith's expression softens a fraction. He tilts his head, hair falling from his face. He gazes up at Lance, eyes crinkling, smile soft and small. "Lance," he says, his name like a fond, exasperated smile. He leans forward, playfully going up on his toes to press his lips to Lance's in a quick kiss. He pulls far enough away to say, voice barely audible, to the camera, "Just shut up and dance with me." The dance is awkward at best. Lance is unsure of his movement with the boot on his foot. Keith holds on to him, pulls Lance against him, and leads him through the dance. Eventually, Lance loosens up, relaxes, leans into Keith, trusts him to lead him, and while the boot hampers and stiffens his movements, he doesn't let it hold him back. They whisper amongst themselves, and Lance laughs loudly, throwing back his head and wrapping his arms tight around Keith's neck. Keith buries his face in Lance's neck, shoulders shaking with laughter. They eventually get pushed out of the circle by Garan, who takes it as his time to shine, whisking the circle wider with his quick and wide movements. And recording. Recording. Hello? Is this thing on? The frame comes into focus, shifting and jerking until it settles on a close-up of Green. Oh, wow, too close. The camera zooms out, leaving Matt framed in the center of the shot. He's wearing a headband, copper hair pushed up at wild and crazy angles, giving him a ridiculous mane. His face is covered with green, leaving a peak of pale skin around his eyes, mouth, nostrils, and hairline. As the camera fades in and out of focus, finally zeroing in on his face, he grins. His arms are held out clearly, holding the camera with both hands. Hey, check it out! We're aliens!
Surrender, Earthlings!
Comes a droning, nasally voice. The camera tilts, putting the upper half of Pidge's face in the frame. They, too, have a headband pushing their hair up at odd angles, green plastered to their face. One finger is at each temple, as close to the green as they can get, pulling their eyes out wide, rolling them back up into their head.
Destruction of your planet is imminent!
Finally! Comes Shiro's voice from off-screen, bland and dry. Maybe I'll actually be able to rest.
Sleep is for the weak!
Pidge and Matt say together, turning to blink at each other in surprise before laughing. The camera moves back a few inches, revealing that the two of them are sitting on the floor, backs to a simple dresser.
Speaking of aliens,
Pidge says, leaning into Matt and forward, putting themselves more into the frame. Their lips curve into a lopsided, crooked smile, eyes squinting with amusement.
Matt, tell them about the time that you watched Flashdance for the first time.
Shiro's soft laughter can be heard off screen, and Matt's face turns in the direction of it, a small pout on his lips, even as his eyes remain amused. Well, he says, turning back to the camera. Pidge settles back against the dresser. Shiro wanted me to watch Flashdance with him because apparently it's a classic dance film or whatever, but I didn't want to. So he told me that it was a movie about aliens taking over the Earth, and the only way humans could express themselves and break free was through dance. Beside them, Pidge's snickering and Shiro's muffled chuckles can be heard across the room. Oh my god, comes Keith's voice, amused and astounded. Shiro, my man! Lance says, followed by the sound of a high five. Shiro, I can't believe you, Allura says, but there's laughter in her voice. I can't believe he believed you, Hunk says. I bet that makes for an interesting viewing experience, Garan chimes in. Oh, it did, Matt says, smiling now, eyes roaming above the camera as he looks at the others before returning to the frame. I spent the whole movie seeing it through an alien invasion lens, and I got so into it, thinking it was a really subtle telling of alien possession that only the 80s can pull off. But I was really confused by the end when the aliens hadn't actually shown up. He got so mad at me, Shiro says. It was so hard not to break down in the middle of the movie when he started talking about his theories and the intricacies of the storytelling. I was into it, okay? Matt says, trying to pull off indignant defensiveness but falling short as he smiles. It made the movie more interesting. Now I want to watch that movie with aliens in mind, Hunk says thoughtfully. We can watch it sometime next week, Allura suggests. Make a note of it. I recommend we watch all our favorite dance movies through an alien lens, Garan says. I'm down, Pidge says, grinning, head turned to Matt. What'd you say? He shrugs, grinning back at them. I've already got an advantage. We should totally do it. Sweet! Pidge reaches out then, and the camera frame jostles as they take the camera away from Matt, putting themselves in the center of the shot for a moment.
Anyway, so we're at our hotel room for the night, or actually one of them. We have 2 rooms so everyone can have a bed, but we're hanging out in one.
Lance is making us do face masks, Matt says, leaning into the frame and pointing to his face. Pidge shrugs with one shoulder, easy smile on their lips.
He said it would be relaxing, and he wants us to look our best for tomorrow, so here we are. The camera turns slowly, showing a typical hotel room. Door and bathroom at the far end. 2 desk and dresser combined with a TV atop it. A table and chairs by the window. 2 full-size beds. The camera focuses in on Corinne and Allura. He sits on the edge of the bed, legs crossed, dressed in a light fluffy robe with a towel curled atop his head. His face is covered in the same green face mask. Allura sits on the floor in front of him, dressed in a similar robe. She has her phone in one hand and one earbud in an ear, the other dangling. Her face is also covered. Corinne meticulously brushes through her damp hair, rolling it into curlers with practiced ease. The camera shifts, showing the rest of the bed. Hunk and Shiro sit against the headboard. Shiro lays stretched out, legs crossed at the ankles, hands intertwined on his lap as he stares idly at the ceiling. Hunk sits straighter, legs crossed beneath him. "I can't really move my face," Shiro says thoughtfully, features scrunching and drying mask cracking as he does so. "Me neither," Hunk says, a DS in hands as he plays a game. "Feels kind of tingly. I think that means it's working? I hope so. Otherwise, I'd be worried our faces are burning off. Wouldn't that make for a shocking performance tomorrow?" Hunk chuckles. "It kind of smells like guacamole too. But like, with a hint of citrus." Shiro's head tilts slightly to the side, looking up at Hunk's small smile playing across his lips. "I dare you to try it." "What, like eat it?" Shiro nods and Hunk looks thoughtful before lifting a finger to his face, peeling off a small bit of the face mask. He looks at the goop on his finger with intense concentration, eyeing it closely and lifting it to his nose to sniff. Shiro bites his bottom lip, eyes dancing as he tries to hold back a laugh. Finally, Hunk shrugs and pops the finger into his mouth. His reaction is immediate disgust, face twisting so sharply that his drying face mask cracks. Shiro curls up with laughter, gripping his stomach and tossing his head back. Hunk shoves him playfully before going back to his game. "It wasn't that bad." "Really?" "Yeah, why don't you try it?" "Not a chance." Matt and Paige snicker behind the camera before the frame shifts. It focuses on the other bed. Lance sits up against the headboard and Keith sits between his legs, leaning back against him. His legs are stretched out while Lance's are bent at his sides. His head settles on Lance's chest just below his chin. Lance's arms wrap loosely around Keith's middle. They're both in pajamas and both have green face masks like the rest of them. Keith's headband pushes his hair away from his face, but unlike Paige and Matt, it's pushed far enough back to keep his hair from sticking up. They're both staring down at Keith's phone as he fiddles with it. Keith reaches up, absently going to poke at the green goo on his face. Lance slaps his hand away, barely looking at it. "Don't touch it!" "But it itches," Keith says, lips pursing and brow furrowing beneath the green layer. "That means it's working!" "Doing what?" "Making your skin smooth and pretty." "You said I was already pretty." "You are unfairly pretty, given that you don't do anything, but that's no excuse for poor skincare. Your pores are a mile wide, Keith. Waldo could probably hide in them." "When can I wash it off?" he grumbles, tilting his head back to look up at Lance. Lance reaches over to his abandoned phone, checking the screen. "5 more minutes." Keith groans and Lance smiles, reaching up to smooth his hair back. "Stop being a baby! Just let it be relaxing." "How could it be relaxing when my face itches and I'm not allowed to scratch it?" Lance shrugs. "Beauty is pain." Keith looks thoughtful for a second, then lowers his head to look back at his phone. "Makes sense," he says easily. "You're the most beautiful person I know and you're a pain in my ass." "Oh my god!" Lance says, half a groan and half a laugh. He playfully swats at Keith's shoulder. "Only you can both compliment me and insult me in the same sentence." Keith's smile is small and private, smug and proud, and the camera captures it all. "They are so gay," Paige says in a whisper behind the camera. "So gay," Matt says, voice close. "It's kinda cute." "Yeah, but don't tell them that. It'll go to their heads." Keith's eyes flicker up, staring at the camera before sliding to the two behind it. His smile fades into a frown. "Are you two still recording?" Lance's eyes lift to the camera as well, more intrigued than disgruntled. "What? Us? No! Never. Wouldn't dream of it." Keith's brows furrow. "Turn it off." "Or what?" Paige challenges. "Or I'll record you talking in your sleep." "Okay, fine, jeez." The camera angle shakes, tilting downward to capture the carpet and Pidge's sagged feet. No need to play dirty. And recording. Recording. We're here! Lance says, coming into focus. He's in the center of the frame, catching him from the side as he walks. He throws up a thumbs up with one hand, the other on a crutch wedged under his arm. His head is turned, grinning brightly at the camera. His hair falls perfectly into place, skin radiating the early morning sunlight. His strides are lopsided without the smooth ease of a normal walk, but there's an easy rhythm to his limp. He throws out a hand gesturing in front of him, and the camera moves to put the towering building in front of them into focus. They're moving forward across the parking lot. At the bottom of the frame, tops of cars can be seen, floods of people, and the closer backs of the rest of their friends. The camera slides back to Lance in time for him to say, "Today is the day of originals! We're running like zero sleep at Chipotle Coffee, but we're here!" The coffee was not a good idea. Hunk's voice comes from behind the camera, muttered and low. "I've had nervous shits like twice already." "I don't think you're the only one," Lance says, dismissively waving him off. "Besides, you'd be dead on your feet without the coffee." "True," Hunk says thoughtfully, then a little more reproachfully. "You sure you want to carry that crutch with you, dude? Like, you don't need it anymore, right?" Lance's smile slowly fades and he turns forward, face pinching, thoughtful. He shrugs. "No, I don't really need it anymore, but it's still easier to have it. And we'll be walking around a lot today, and people tend to move out of my way if they see I have a crutch, since it's more visible than just a boot. I don't know. It's just a case thing, you know? And I can walk faster in it. Don't want to be slowing everyone down." "Dude," Hunk says, voice soft and kind, "you know we don't care about that." Lance shrugs again, small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Yeah, well, can't blame a guy for being courteous. Besides, it's not like the crutch is gonna hurt me. I just got the walking boot, so I don't really want to aggravate my leg by walking too much on it right away." "Fair enough," Hunk says, camera jostling slightly. "Anyway, regionals." Lance brightens immediately. "Right! Regionals! We're here! And everyone is dressed and ready to go! Hunk, pan the camera!" "Oh, right, sorry." The camera moves in front of them, revealing the rest of their friends as they walk across the parking lot. "Where's Karan?" he asks after a moment, camera frame shifting slightly from side to side. "He's way up there," Lance says, his arm coming to the side of the frame pointing. The camera focuses in the distance, zooming in until a blob of bright orange hair can be seen. "He has to make sure everyone from Altea is organized and stuff backstage, so he's going ahead." The camera shifts up and down, zooming back out. "Makes sense." "Anyway, there's everyone else," Lance says, visible hand gesturing. Allura and Pidge walk side by side, nearly leaning into each other, but not quite. Both of them carry a cup of coffee in their hands, shoulders slouched, heads drooping. They're wrapped up in hoodies that swallow their frames. Both of them sway precariously, looking like they might fall asleep at any moment. They each carry a small duffel bag in their free hands, bumping into each other as they walk. Matt stands not too far away. He walks with his hoodie open, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, hands shoved into the pockets of his jeans. He walks with his weight leaned back, head tilted back as he yawns before hunching his head forward. Keith and Shiro walk further ahead, off to the side. Keith hunches over, hands shoved in his pockets. Shiro stands close, arms thrown over his shoulder. Their heads are bowed together as they talk, but the camera can't pick up what they're saying. Neither of them seem aware of anything else. They both have similar small duffel bags thrown over a shoulder. The camera turns again and held up and away, slightly to the side, so that Hunk takes up a majority of the frame, but Lance can be seen in the background walking beside him. "Everyone is super tired but also super nervous," he says, whispering loudly. "But like a good kind of nervous. Nervous and excited. Or at least they would be excited if they weren't about to fall asleep." "They'll wake up more once we get inside," Lance says, glancing at the camera with a small smile. "Solos are up first, and then duos and groups go after lunch." "Yeah, so Keith is gonna be the first of us to go." Hunk's ease melts into worry, brow pinching slightly as his gaze flickers away from the camera, somewhere ahead of them and to the side. "Do you think he's okay?" he asks, turning to Lance. "He was a little off this morning." Lance's smile is small and fond, but it doesn't quite reach his eyes. "He's just nervous. He'll be fine." "Do you think you should talk to him?" "I will.
he says, expression softening. After Shiro, though. Don't want to interrupt the big bro pep talk.
Good point. The camera remains on as they reach the other side of the parking lot, people gathering close and crowded as they wait to cross the street, moving as a mob once the light turns. The atmosphere is tense with excitement and nerves. It can be seen in the way everyone holds themselves, in the way they move, in the way their eyes snap around them. Some people deal with it through chattering, while others deal with it through silence. It creates a disjointed atmosphere in the early morning. The camera stops as the rest of the group gathers. Keith stands off to the side, looking uncertain at the main doors before glancing to the side, where a string of people with bags slung over their shoulders are headed toward another, smaller door. He takes a step back, turning his gaze to Shiro, eyebrows furrowed and lips pinched. He looks small and worried, nerves showing clearly even as he tries to hide them. His gaze flickers around the group. Allura is the first to start forward, wrapping him up in a hug and pulling him in, despite the coffee cup and bag in her hands.
You'll do great, Keith. I will be there cheering you on the whole time.
She takes a step back, giving him an encouraging smile before letting her arms drop. His smile is small, doesn't reach his eyes, but it's genuine. Matt steps forward, wrapping one arm around him and pulling him into a side hug, shaking him vigorously. Knock him dead, dude! You got this! Paige steps up and punches his free arm.
Stop worrying! You're making me nervous! You'll do great!
They both step away. The camera shifts off to the side as Hunk steps up to him, camera pointing to the ground. Their legs are captured, Hunk's and Keith's, close as they hug. We believe in you, dude. The hug lasts a moment longer before Hunk steps away, camera swinging back up as he does so. It focuses back in on Keith as Shiro steps in to hug him. The hug is long and lingering, Keith letting his forehead rest on Shiro's shoulder. Shiro can be heard mumbling softly to him, but the words are indistinct. When he steps away, gripping Keith's shoulders for a second, they're both smiling. Then Lance is there, shoving his crutch at Shiro to take before wrapping Keith up in his arms, pulling him to his chest. Keith sighs with his whole body, relaxing into him as his arms wrap tightly around Lance's waist, fingers grasping the back of his shirt tight. Keith buries his face in Lance's neck, shoulder and back slumping. Despite his tight grip, he visibly relaxes. Lance wraps his arms around Keith's shoulders, one hand lifting to run through his hair, soothing and slow. He leans his head against Keith's. Hey, man, Lance says, voice a low murmur, but just loud enough for the camera to pick up. You're gonna do great. What if... Keith starts, but his words mumble off. Lance chuckles, shoulders shaking with it. You're not gonna mess this up. I've seen you practice, dude. I've been there for most of it. Just relax, ignore the audience, and dance. This is for you. And if you mess up, just roll with it. No one will know unless you let them. Keith pulls back then, just far enough to lift his head. They still stand close, neither of them quite letting go. What can be seen of Keith's expression is worried eyes and pursed lips half hidden by his hair. I wish you could come with me, Keith says, voice barely audible. Lance's smile is small and soft. I know, he says, pushing some of Keith's hair behind his ear. But I'll be there watching you. If you get nervous, just find me. Pretend it's like any other practice. Okay, Keith says, but it's more visible than it is audible. They lean forward at the same time, coming together in a kiss that's long and languid, sweet and lingering. Lance pecks his lips quickly, once more, as he pulls away smiling. Now go find Karan and get ready! Keith gives him a weak smile, but steps away. He glances around at everyone, giving them a small awkward wave, which they all return. Then he turns on his heel and walks away, heading toward the smaller side door. The further he goes, the more confident his steps become. The straighter he stands, the more determined he strides. He lifts his chin, shoulders squared, and only glances back once before disappearing, a visible smile on his lips. End recording. Recording. The frame opens up in darkness, bare lights shedding minor details on what's being shown. Feet and legs trapped between the seat they sit on and the back of seats in front of them. The camera turns its angle and Lance comes into the frame. It's higher, but not quite as high as his face, aimed up at him. Hunk can be seen, sitting next to him, slivers of Shiro showing on Hunk's other side. They're sitting in seats, a tall, dark ceiling above them, spotlights pointed forward. Lance's face is shadowed but lit by lights coming from ahead. He glances down at the camera, fiddling with it before lifting his head to glance forward again.
We think Keith is up next,
he says, voice hushed and low, but practically vibrating with anticipation. There's a smile on his lips, one that he doesn't look entirely aware of.
Yeah, there he is,
Hunk says, hitting Lance's arm, eyes faced forward. The camera spins, lifting and turning ahead of them. They're sitting in a large auditorium, seats rising up and spinning around a wide stage that juts out into the audience for a 3/4 view of it. There are balconies above with more seats. The stage in front of them has lights trained on it. There's a man on stage with a microphone, dressed in a suit and grinning as he walks to the center. Hunk's finger points to the corner of the stage, however, and the camera zooms in until a figure can be seen just at the edge of backstage.
Next up,
The man with a microphone announces, cheerful and at ease,
please welcome Keith Gogane to the stage representing Altea Dance Studio.
He steps back, waving a hand out to where Keith detangles himself from the shadows. The man walks away, disappearing backstage, while Keith walks to the center. His pace is slow but confident, with only a minor hesitancy that gives away his nervousness. His chin is lifted high, but there's a slight hunch to his shoulders. The audience claps and cheers, but none so loud as the row that Lance sits in. The camera's microphone is muffled with the screams, claps, and whistles that come from the row of Altea Dance Studio representatives. The camera turns to catch sight of them, half of them standing and throwing hands up to encourage Keith. Their whole group of friends sit together in a row, but the camera moves beyond, showing several rows worth of dancers from Altea, all of them adamantly cheering for Keith. The camera moves back forward as the cheering dies down. Keith stands center stage, subtly shifting his weight from foot to foot.
Wait a second,
Lance says, voice close to the microphone. The camera shifts forward as Lance leans that way.
Holy crow! Is he wearing my shirt?
His voice is soft and odd.
He asked if I could steal it for him.
Hunk says from next to him, sounding proud of himself.
He wanted to wear it as a tribute to you and for good luck.
Lance makes a noise from behind the camera, followed by a drawn-out
Keith!
Keith is wearing black harem pants tight around his lower legs and looser near his thighs. His shirt is tight enough to fit his form, but loose enough that it shifts when he moves. It's not quite long enough to reach his waistband, leaving a sliver of pale skin visible, showing more when he moves. His arms are bare, his favorite fingerless gloves on his hands. Lance's blue plaid is tied around his waist, giving his dark look a pop of color. A pop of Lance. Keith lifts a hand to shield his eyes, head turning as he scans the audience. A small frown purses his lips.
He doesn't know where we are,
Lance says, voice soft with realization and surprise. The camera jostles, tilting to the side.
Keith!
He shouts, loud and pleading.
Keith, over here!
Hunk seems to realize what's going on and joins in, but both of them are drowned out as one of the judges, placed at a raised table in front of the stage, speak through the microphone. Keith Gogane, are you ready? His hand drops from his forehead, but his expression looks more worried than before. Despite this, he offers them a hesitant thumbs up.
He's going to choke,
Lance says, voice low and urgent.
He's going to freeze up.
Dude, how do you know?
Hunk asks, urgency matching Lance's.
I just do, Hunk. I know him. He was looking for us. For me. He's going to... I need to get out there.
The camera moves quickly, dropping the stage from sight and showing their legs as Lance stands up. Hunk's lap comes into focus.
Hunk, take this.
Lance, what are you...
He has to see me. I have to get out there. Just make sure you record this performance.
The camera lifts, wobbling as it captures Lance awkwardly pushing himself to his feet and attempting to get his crutch under his arm. He's sitting on the end of the row, but it's still a struggle to get out of the auditorium seat given the small space and the large awkwardness of his boot and crutch. The music has already started up. A few rapid notes winding up, filling the auditorium space as the audience settles down. Notes coming back down rhythmically. The camera turns to Keith, still standing center stage, shifting his weight, shoulders hunching, one hand rubbing his other arm. His eyes scan the audience rapidly, but his head is turned away.
Keith!
Lance shouts loud enough to be heard over the music. The camera whips to the side where Lance is standing in the aisle between seats, leaning heavily on his crutch while he waves his other hand in the air with wide gestures. The camera shifts back to the stage in time to see Keith's head whip around, eyes and head shifting rapidly to pinpoint the source of his name. It's obvious when he finds it. His eyes widen, mouth parting, pinched expression relaxing in his surprise. The camera moves to Lance as he lowers his arm, offering Keith a quick thumbs up before it drops to his side. He doesn't say anything else, but the smile on his face is blinding. He stares at the stage, nothing else fazing him. He looks at ease there, leaning against his crutch, smiling at Keith like they're the only ones in the room. He doesn't say anything more. The camera moves back to the stage and Keith is smiling. His entire body has lifted, shoulders pulled back, weight distributed evenly, head held high. He looks lighter, more at ease. Nothing about his expression is pinched anymore, and his dark eyes seem to sparkle beneath the spotlights. As he turns his body to face the front of the stage, his head remains turned toward Lance, grin fading into a more controlled small smirk. His body seems to roll a little bit, weight shifting from foot to foot with it, shoulders bobbing along, even as his head remains in place, feeling out the beat. Then the beat drops, the lyric starts, and Keith is in motion, from 0 to 60 in a single beat. Movements sharp and wide, and arms shooting up, elbow angle sharp, moving his hand around his head. His hips and his entire body roll with it. It rolls into a pose, holding it just long enough for the pose to be noticed before he's moving again. He lifts up a knee, hands going behind his head with his elbows out. He takes a step, sliding forward with a brief moment of slow motion. Back foot lifting up, falling with his arms as his body bends before popping back up. Brief quick motions following, almost robotic. His back leg swings out and then forward, snapping him back to facing front stage. Keith's choreography is sharp and quick, interspersed with moments of slow rolls and defined poses. It moves with the beat, matching the sharp accents and rolling melody. His hips pop, legs twisting and stepping, arms gesturing wildly. He goes from robotic to smooth movements to jerking quickness in seconds. The movement is wild and styled, grabbing, demanding, and keeping attention. One would be afraid to look away for fear of missing something, stepping enraptured and leaning on his every movement, eager for the next. His movements have attitude, head and expression matching. It fits with the song, with the music, with the groove. All of it sings together cohesively. He moves around the stage, owning it, movements wild and controlled. No moment is boring, no moment is slow. He tosses his head and rolls his hips, taking advantage of the sweep of his hair and the control he has over his body. With each wild movement, his shirt rides up, revealing a pale and toned stomach before the next movement hides it again. Lance's blue plaid flares out around him as he spins, accentuating each roll and grind of his hips. It's clear that he knows his body and he knows how to use it. The stiffness around him, the hardness, the reluctance, all melts away when he dances, showing a side of Keith that's softer but still sharp with edges. Edges that are both dangerous and exhilarating, as alluring as they are threatening. It doesn't take long before his smile becomes apparent, slipping through the cracks of his mask when his face becomes visible. It's clear that not only does he know he's doing well, but he's enjoying himself. It adds a whole new level of excitement to his dance. As the chorus builds, there are several quick-to-slow movements, ones that are sassy in essence, playful in the way they're delivered. Whips of his head and claps of his hands, all of it that are just hints of Lance's touch and guidance leaking their way into Keith's choreography. As the last word belts out, fading to nothing, Keith hits a pose, holding it as the music starts to fade out. His hair is wild, half covering his face. His shoulders and chest are heaving with every breath he takes, exposed skin glistening slightly in the spotlights. Then the music fades out, the audience cheers, and Keith eases out of his pose with a smile. The camera jostles as Hunk stands, shouting along with everyone else around him. Keith grins on stage, bowing slightly before lifting a hand to wave. As he turns to leave, his head stops, eyes locking onto the aisle nearby. His grin is no less wide, but it softens at the edges before he turns and hurries off stage. The camera turns to Lance, still standing in the aisle. He's leaning against the crutch, both hands on it, as he casually stands there. His head is tilted to the side, a fond smile on his face, and a soft look in his eyes. He looks happy. He looks proud. He looks like a man in love. And recording. Recording. The camera cuts on, revealing a brightly lit hallway with linoleum floors, a painted concrete wall covered in posters and paintings on one side, and a wall of windows on the other side. The hallway is wide and filled with people, some milling around in groups and others walking through. The voices of general conversation fade to a background din. The camera's angle is fairly low compared to previous recordings, indicating someone shorter is holding it.
Do you see him yet?
Paige's voice comes from off-screen.
Maybe he got lost. It is pretty crowded here and the back rooms are pretty confusing.
Hunk says, his body barely visible at the edge of the screen. The group stands around, all facing toward an open double door where people are filing out of and moving into the hallway traffic.
He'll be here,
Shiro says, standing tall and confident, arms crossed over his chest, eyes trained on the door.
I wonder what's taking so long.
Matt says, hands in his pockets, leaning his way to one side as he glances around the hallway.
I feel like everyone's left already. There can't be much more back there.
He lifts a hand, looking down at the watch on his wrist.
We've got to grab food before you guys have to start getting ready. The break for lunch is only so long.
Karan is probably talking to them.
Allura says, hands behind her back, bouncing on her heels, chin lifted to see higher.
He likes to give pep talks to the dancers before and after the performances.
And he can get a little long-winded,
Shiro says, not unkindly.
There he is!
Lance says, voice loud with excitement, yet managing to be breathless all the same. The camera focuses on where Lance is suddenly moving, walking quickly, using his singular crutch as a way to swing himself faster, propel himself forward. The frame shifts ahead of him to where Keith has come out of the door, bag over his shoulder, and looking around with a slight pinch to his brows. He stops when he sees Lance coming toward him, a smile breaking out across his face for a second before they meet and his expression is hidden. His bag drops to the floor, as does Lance's crutch. Their embrace is solid, both of them grasping each other, wobbling back and forth. Then Lance's arms wrap around Keith's waist and he picks him up. Keith lets out a wordless shout, wrapping his arms around Lance's shoulders as Lance spins him around. They get bigger and the camera shakes as Pidge and the rest of them hurry over to join the two. Lance has put Keith back down, hands moving to cup his face, their foreheads pressed together. The camera moves to the side below their face level, peering up between them to capture the soft smile and watery eyes on Keith's face.
You were amazing!
Lance says, voice low and breathy, but the camera picks it up all the same. Their moment is destroyed when Hunk pushes past the camera, making it whirl and shake as Pidge stumbles to the side. When it refocuses on the two, they're both wrapped up tight in Hunk's arms, both of them crushed together and lifted off the ground.
Keith, that was so cool!
Shiro's hand lands on Keith's shoulder, catching his attention. Shiro's smile is wide and proud.
You did great!
We knew you could do it, Allura says, throwing her arms around the three of them, though she can't reach very far.
Hey!
Pidge says, indignant as the camera frame lifts, shifting slightly but keeping the group hug in the shot. Go on, Matt says, voice soft and fond. In the bottom of the frame, Matt's hand pushes Pidge toward the group. Get in there. Pidge gives the camera a crooked smile before launching themselves toward the group, throwing the arms around Keith just as Hunk lowers them to the ground. Matt chuckles softly, keeping the camera trained on the group hug. And recording. Recording. Lance takes up one side of the frame, once again in the auditorium, face lit by light from the stage, shadows around them. Keith is on the other side of the frame, sitting next to him, ducking down a little to get into the shot, giving the camera a small smile and a little wave. Lance's free arm is around his shoulders, and Keith leans to his side. He's now wearing the blue plaid shirt, sleeves pushed up to his elbows.
Here we go,
he says in a loud whisper, grinning.
Round two!
The camera swivels to show Matt sitting at his other side. He turns to the camera, giving it 2 thumbs up with a wide, crooked grin. Then he turns his attention forward, practically sitting on the edge of his seat. The camera moves to follow his gaze, focusing on the stage. The host stands with a microphone, gesturing behind him.
Please welcome to the stage Pidge Holt and Hunk Garrett from Altea Dance Studio.
He walks away as Pidge and Hunk take to the stage side by side, grinning widely and waving to the audience. Lance's cheers and screams drown out Keith's, but it doesn't compare to the hollers that leave Matt. They stop when they reach center stage, grabbing each other's hand and bowing dramatically in sync. They're both dressed to match, both with straight dark blue jeans ending in plain Converses. They're both wearing button-downs, Pidge's a muted light green and Hunk's a muted yellow. Over top that, they each have matching ivory blazers, worn loose and open. Their accessories are matching suspenders, bow ties, and a driver's cap atop each of their heads. When they straighten, they let go of each other's hands and step to the side to give each other space.
Pidge and Hunk, are you two ready?
They both give an enthusiastic thumbs up, and the music begins to play. It starts out with a couple loud notes, immediately dropping low, building with short, jagged notes to a ragtag rhythm. As it builds, Hunk and Pidge start to walk forward, each step exaggerated, robotic, each movement stiff and ragged. They wave, tug at the lapels of their jackets, nod to the audience, bright grins on their faces. Pidge tips their cap. As the main beat drops, rising the volume of the music, Hunk poses, feet and arms pointing to Pidge, head turned toward them. Pidge follows the movement to that side, half putting their back to him. They do a lot of quick movements with their arms, letting the movement roll down their torso to their legs. It jitters down their body, making the roll smooth but jerky, shaking down their legs to bounce back up to their arms. They flare out their arms like the momentum is tossing them around, unable to control it. Then, as the beat drops, they twist and turn, freezing with their arm out, palm pointing toward Hunk. As if the beat were tossed out of their hand, leaving them motionless, they freeze as Hunk picks up the movement. It rolls through Hunk's body into his forearm, body twisting to face forward. It shakes down his legs before bouncing back up. It weaves through his arms, legs still shifting with it. It rolls out to his forearm. When it reaches his hand, he turns, freezing as if throwing the beat back to Pidge. Pidge is already in movement, a different series of movements that are more in their arms than anything, before pointing at Hunk, who takes it away on his own. His movements are shorter, all in his arms. He steps his legs together, and as he does, Pidge strikes another pose. They freeze for half a second, suspended in time while they look at each other, and then they're moving. It's a jive, swinging and rolling with the music opposite of each other and slightly different, but somehow still in sync. They take several steps back, and then they lock and sync together, stepping forward with the beat, taking a step to the side. They move together, each movement with the beat. They slide and snap into place, moving from perfectly in sync to directly opposite each other so quickly that it's hard to pinpoint the movements they deviate. Their movements are fun, flamboyant, and riles up the crowd. It's not technical and dangerous and seductive, full of raw and intense energy as Keith had been. It's fun! It's easy! It's quick and complicated, but they do it with such high energy that it looks simple. Smiles remain on their faces throughout it all, encouraging the crowd to smile along with them. They play off their jackets, they tip their caps, they go from smooth and big movements into sharp, jagged, robotic ones. They take turns dancing, one of them striking a pose and pointing at the other, either with fingers or just a dramatic turn of their heads, smiling as they freeze, chest heaving as they pant, while the other goes off on their own series of movements, only to throw the beat right back. Then they shift back to synchronized movements like they had never left it. Somehow, they manage to put on a performance that leaves them each completely unique and individual, but synchronized enough that it's clear that they're a pair, and that the dance would be lacking without the other. They slide from synchronization into separate movements, looking like they're both going off on their own, but then dragging it back together by playing off one another. It doesn't look like a duo who practiced and drilled choreography into the ground. It looks like two friends having fun on stage. It's complicated and technical, high energy and difficult, but they do it in such a way that it doesn't feel that way. Their energy is addicting, transfixing, and the crowd starts clapping and cheering along with them. When they strike their final pose, looking like robots shutting down, arms out and bent in front of them, legs frozen, backs straight as they bend forward, they hold the pose as the music fades out. Then the audience roars. The camera jerks up as Lance stands cheering loudly, camera jostling. Other people start to clap. Pitch and Hunk hold hands to bow deep to all sides of the stage before waving and turning to walk back. Matt's whistles and cheers are louder than anyone else's close to the microphone. His voice can be heard above the crowd screaming at the top of his lungs, "That's my sibling!" And recording. Recording. When the camera cuts back on, it's pointed at the stage. Shiro and Allura stand there, feet shoulder-width apart, heads bowed toward the floor. Shiro stands to Allura's side but several steps behind. The lights pointed at the stage are soft and subdued, muted hues that set the atmosphere for the performance. "Here we go," comes Lance's voice, a hushed and excited whisper from behind the camera. The music starts up, the recognizable opening refrain of "Just give me a reason." As soon as the music starts, Shiro lifts his head slowly, walking forward casually but rhythmically until he stands just over Allura's shoulder. She slowly lifts her head. Both of their expressions are soft and pained, without the slightest hint of a smile. As the lyrics start, Shiro lifts a hand splayed wide in front of Allura's chest, held away from her and moving it in slow dramatic circles. She then slowly starts to lean forward until she's falling. He catches her with his hand, immediately pushing her back. Her arms go up and out as she falls back, and he moves back with her, catching her with arms beneath hers. He lowers her gently to the ground, but before she touches the stage, her knees bend and he lifts her back up. She straightens, leaning forward, arms out behind her. Shiro leans back, holding onto her arms to keep her from falling. They let go with one hand, free arms going out as they turn to look at each other. Allura spins around, positioning herself next to Shiro, slightly behind. She wraps an arm around his neck, leaning into his shoulder from behind. He bends his legs and she leans down with him, extending a leg straight behind her, pointed. Then Shiro is standing, jumping, and Allura is curling up her knees to move with him. They move together, slowly and gracefully, not a movement out of place or uncontrolled. Allura is graceful and strong, body controlled and in place, even when falling to the stage or being lifted. She moves like water. She moves like the music is pulling at her, and she is a puppet, a slave to the tugging of her strings. And if she is the water, then Shiro is the current, driving her forward, guiding her, lifting her, spinning her, moving each motion into the next. He's strong, lifting her and moving her with controlled precision, but he moves with his own easy grace. They work together, not like gears, but like two birds in flight, weaving around each other. Their movements move quick and slow, bending and twisting with the rhythm of the music, of the canter of the lyrics, like the words are the pull at their strings, and they have no choice but to obey. When the chorus hits, Shiro throws Allura to the side. She lands on light feet, and then the two of them are moving in synchronized motions. Not touching, but perfectly together. Big sweeping motions, pointed toes, legs spinning, and bodies bending. They slide into a near split, using the downward momentum to roll across the floor. And then their synchronization breaks, Shiro lying on his back as Allura moves over top him. They hold hands as she leans her weight into his feet, and he holds her up when she moves her legs. And then she's lowered slowly to his chest, only to be pushed away between his legs as they sit up. Shiro wraps her up in a hug from behind, expression pained as he rests his cheek against her shoulder. She grabs his arms, twisting back and forth, face pinched in pain, as she makes a show of struggling to get away. When she does, she stands, hand still on his forearm, to pull him to his feet. She moves out and away before bouncing back, spinning and planting a foot on his thigh and lip, immediately standing up and wrapping her thighs around his neck. He holds her there, spins, her arms and legs out. Then the second verse drops, and she falls with the momentum of their spin, immediately being caught in Shiro's arms. The control and strength of it is extraordinary, making it seem too easy and graceful, smooth and casual. Their performance is a story. It moves with the music, with the tale of the song. It showcases the emotion coming across in the notes, in the singers' voices. It's reflected on their expressions, both of them looking pained and torn, half the time with their eyes closed. It's in the minor performances of their actions, the way they tell a story of struggles. And still they manage to complement each other perfectly. Shiro moves and guides Allura, an accessory to her beauty and grace, showcasing all her talents, moving her through poses as if she were a doll on display, a background hand. Yet Allura acts as a prop to Shiro's talent. His guiding of her, his control, his strength, his own grace. They each stand out individually, yet each put each other's strengths on display. They complement each other in a way that's so fluid, so whole and complete, that the performance can't exist without the other. Neither of them is the star. They are the show together. Two halves of the same whole, trusting, loving, complete. It has emotional depth. It has a story. The dance and the performers move so effortlessly with the song that they seem one and the same. There's a trust between them, a push and pull, a tug and release. Each touch is a whisper. Each touch is a passion. They own the stage. They own the auditorium, demanding attention and refusing to let it go. Yet they dance like they're alone. They build their performance like a personal moment, a conversation, an argument, a makeup, all between them. No one else to see, yet on display for everyone. When Shiro lifts Allura high over his head, the music pauses, a note held, a moment of suspense. They both stand frozen, a moment suspended in time, statues on stage as the tension of silence stretches. Shiro doesn't shake, nor does Allura's pose collapse. They hold, perfect and pristine. The audience begins to holler, clapping and cheering as the music starts back up and Shiro slowly lowers Allura to the ground. The cheers are heartfelt, honest, and raw. The two of them on stage stand close, touches painful and personal, neither of them dancing, yet still completely within the performance. When they begin to move again, it's in motions reminiscent of earlier in the song, callbacks to the beginning as the chorus builds again, yet with new vigor. As the music dies down, Shiro is left sitting on the floor, knees up, head bowed and scratching his head as Allura slowly paces away. Then she turns, striding back around behind him. A soft touch on his neck and he stands, spinning around and around as he rises. Then they're facing each other, wrapping each other up in a hug, forehead touching as the last notes fade out. They hold the pose, chests and shoulders heaving with breath as the audience erupts around them. Loud, chaotic, and heartfelt. They slowly step away from each other, torn and hurt expressions gone in favor of wide grins. They hold hands as they bow, all traces of the emotional performance shed from their shoulders. Their steps are lighter as they turn to walk off stage. The camera shakes and jostles, rising as Lance moves to his feet. His shouts and cheers blend in with Matt's high-pitched whistles and claps. What can be seen of the audience seems to be standing, and the applause lasts long after Shiro and Allura leave the stage. And recording. Recording. The camera cuts on, blurring for a moment on a yellow button-down with suspenders. Then it zooms out, Hunk coming into focus. The camera shifts upward until Hunk's upper half is in the bottom part of the frame, and Pidge is in the upper half. They sit atop his broad shoulders, legs hanging down in front of him, where Hunk holds on loosely. Their hands rest casually on Hunk's head turned as they survey the crowd from their vantage point, a slight pinch to their brows. And there they are, the stars of the evening, Matt's voice says, bright and cheerful. Hunk grins, but Pidge rolls their eyes. Matt, please. Come on, he says, light and playful. The camera shifts as he adjusts. Show it off. Pidge rolls their eyes again, but a crooked smile slowly tugs at their lips. They sigh loud and long, putting a thin layer of exasperation behind it. Fine! They sit up a little straighter, pulling up the ribbon that's hanging around their neck, putting the silver medal on display. Hunks let go of one of their legs and lifts his own, grin bright and proud. The bright hallway light catches on the medal, making it glint and shine. Ta-da! Matt says, his arm coming into the frame as he gestures toward the two of them, waving his fingers out like jazz hands. It's just the fan favorite award, Pidge says, letting their medal drop back to their chest. Both of them have abandoned their jackets, rolling their sleeves up to their elbows. It's not even like we placed. Yeah,
Hunk says, letting his medal drop and resting his hand back on Pidge's leg hanging over his shoulder. His eyes are slightly lidded, grin turning smug.
But we're the fan favorite 2 years in a row.
Fuck yeah, we are!
Hunk lets go of them with one hand, lifting a fist casually. Pidge barely glances at it, but bumps it with proud enthusiasm. The grin on their face betrays their attempt at nonchalance.
Hey, Hunk, turn a bit so I can get a better view.
They say, idly patting at his cheek. Their voice is soft enough to be private, but still picked up at the camera. Hunk obliges, half turning so Pidge has a better view down the hallway. Their eyes are sharp and calculating, smile fading as their lips purse in concentration. You see him yet?
No. I hope the idiot didn't get lost.
He's been here before. He won't get lost.
Yeah, but
Hunk pats their knee.
he'll be fine. He's got a crutch and a boot, remember? Just give him a few more minutes.
Pidge huffs, but their eyes remain fixed down the hall. Nyong! Matt mumbles the sound effects as the camera moves to the side to where Shiro, Allura, and Keith stand, talking amongst themselves.
Now you guys.
He says louder, catching their attention. All three of them turn to look, blinking in brief confusion.
Show the goods!
Clarity seems to light in their eyes, and Shiro takes a step closer to Allura, wrapping an arm around her waist as he leans over, lifting up the silver medal that rests around his neck. Allura grins, holding up her own medal with one hand and offering a peace sign with the other.
I still think you guys should have gotten first.
Matt says, camera zooming in on Allura's medal. The second place symbol is barely visible as the camera refuses to focus. The frame zooms back out.
Right.
Hunk says, body turning in the edges of the frame to face them, despite Pidge's wordless protest.
They were so good.
It's all right, Shiro says, bashful smile on his lips, posture at ease. He rubs the back of his neck with his free hand.
Second place isn't so bad.
Besides,
Allura adds, letting her medal fall back to her chest.
we still qualified for nationals.
Now that's gonna be a fun road trip.
Matt says with a laugh in his voice.
I can't wait to be Shiro and Allura's groupies.
Hunk says from off-screen, smile evident in his voice. Keith turns to glance at Shiro. He stands with his weight to one side, arms crossed loosely over his chest. A small smile plays at the corner of his lips.
Lance and I are already making plans on how to embarrass you.
Shiro laughs. I suppose I deserve that.
You do.
Keith says flatly.
After years of embarrassing me, this is going to be payback.
He turns then, eyes drifting around the hall, flickering between people. The smile fades from his lips, replaced by a small frown.
Speaking of Lance, where is he?
The camera jostles as Matt shrugs.
Who knows? He's always off doing something.
He says nonchalantly.
He's, probably helping Karan. Or something.
Hunk offers with significantly less grace, followed by a sheepish laugh.
I'm sure he'll turn up. Eventually. Probably. Soon.
Smooth, Hunk.
Paige says, voice flat and low.
Real smooth.
Anyway, Matt says, abruptly changing the subject, and the camera shifts until Keith is centered.
Your turn, dude. Show the goods. Let's go!
Keith rolls his eyes, but lifts a hand to hook his thumb into the ribbon, holding the bronze medal off his chest.
It's just third place.
He mumbles.
I didn't even qualify. It's not a big deal.
Not a big deal.
Paige says, incredulous.
You got third place out of the solo performances after only having barely 2 months to practice. That's half of the time the rest of us got.
Keith shrugs, looking sheepish and bashful as he looks away, letting the medal drop as he crosses his arms back over his chest, shoulders rising a fraction.
Yeah, well, it was based on choreography I already had started, so...
Still, Shiro says, taking a step closer and putting a hand on his shoulder. Keith looks up at him and Shiro beams, soft and fond. We're all proud of you. Keith's smile is small, edges of his expression softening.
Thanks, Shiro.
Guys!
Pidge's urgent hiss is barely picked up by the camera's microphone. The frame shifts until Pidge and Hunk are back in it, and Pidge is subtly pointing down the hall with a nod of their head. Hunk's eyes widen before squinting at the bottoms with a smile.
Oh man, he's coming.
He mutters, bouncing from foot to foot, causing Pidge to sway on his shoulders. The camera turns back to the others, dropping a fraction, just enough that the corner of the frame picks up Matt's foot as he kicks Allura's leg. She looks at him, surprised, and the camera tilts to the side slightly in the same direction Pidge had gestured. Allura's gaze follows the motion, looking off to the side before brightening considerably. Her smile is only there for a moment before she forces it down into something more sly. She winks at the camera before stepping up to Keith. "I wonder what's keeping her on," she says, slipping an arm in Keith's, locking their elbows and turning him around to stare down the other side of the hall, putting their backs to the camera. "Can you see him?" she asks, innocent and curious as she goes up on her toes, putting her free hand to her forehead to shield her eyes, lifting her chin. Shiro watches them curiously, face blank and one eyebrow raised. He then turns to the camera, eyes hovering just above it as he stares at Matt. His confusion deepens for a moment before he turns in the direction Allura had a moment before. His face immediately lights up. Shiro smiles, taking a step to the side, walking past Keith to gently pull Allura away from him. Keith watches the exchange, brows furrowed in confusion. The camera shifts as a flash of red moves in front of it. The red forms a bouquet of roses, 12 of them. Lance leans down until his face is in the camera frame, a sly smile on his lips as he puts a finger to them, winking before he straightens. He hobbles forward a few more steps, stopping just behind Keith. He has one crutch wedged under his right arm, leaning into it to keep weight mostly off his boot. He holds the bouquet of roses in his free hand, a lazy smile on his lips. The camera moves to capture them from the side as Matt steps closer to Shiro and Allura. Keith catches the movement and looks at him, eyebrows raised. Then he catches Lance in the corner of his eye and turns further to look at him. His jaw promptly drops, eyes widening as his jaw goes slack. His lips part wide, eyes flickering from the roses to Lance's face, then back to the roses. He turns all the way around, slowly, arms across his chest, relaxing but not quite falling. His lips shut abruptly, pursing, expression contorting, mouth opening and closing, but he can't seem to find words. He looks back up at Lance, a strange, pleading look in his eyes, head tilted just a fraction to the side. Lance's smile widens just a little, showing a little more teeth, and eyes going soft as he says, "Hey!"
Hey.
Keith echoes, sounding lost, confused, and breathless. "These are for you!" Lance holds out the flowers and Keith just stares at them. And neither of them move for several long seconds. Lance's smile turns amused, but his voice goes soft. "They're flowers, Keith. They're not gonna bite you." Keith's lips purse pressing together tight as red rises up his neck to settle on his cheeks. He reaches out quickly to snatch the flowers from him, but when he touches them, his movements turn softer, and he takes the bouquet gently, pulling them to his chest, cradling them with both arms. His head ducks down, half of his face hidden by his bangs. He shifts the flowers higher, bowing his head, attempting to be subtle about smelling them. It's not subtle.
I didn't even win.
He finally manages to say, keeping his head bowed but lifting his eyes to gaze up at Lance. Lance chuckles. He shrugs with one shoulder, lifting up his free hand to run his fingers through Keith's hair, pushing it out of his face and tucking strands behind his ear.
"Doesn't matter. You were amazing,"
he says, voice soft and intimate.
"I'm so proud of you."
Keith gives up on subtlety and ducks his face to hide in the flowers, shoulders rising and falling as he takes in a deep breath.
Thanks, Lance,
he says with the exhale. He lifts his head, tilting it to the side as he gazes up at him openly, expression gentle and eyes fond. His smile is small on his lips, but lifts the rest of his face. He stares at Lance like they're the only two people in the hall.
They're beautiful.
Lance's smile crooks a little higher, head cocking a little to the side. Almost as beautiful as you.
Lance,
Keith says, exasperation fringed with fondness. He reaches out and shoves Lance, who laughs as he rocks backwards. But then Keith's hand is gripping the front of his shirt, pulling him forcefully forward, going up on his toes to meet him. The kiss starts rough, but melts instantly, both of them easing into one another, coming closer, leaning into each other. They get as close as they can without crushing the roses between them.
Keith's grip eases, but his hand remains curled into Lance's shirt. Lance's arm winding around Keith's waist. Their kiss ends, but they press their foreheads together, both of them smiling soft, intimate smiles.
Next year we're going to take the gold,
Lance says, voice slightly hoarse, barely above a whisper. Keith croaks a smile, leaning back to look Lance over. Next year.
Yeah,
Lance's smile turned sheepish.
if you want to dance with me again? For real this time, not because we both messed up and Shiro forces us together with the disapproving dad face.
There's a start of amusement from off-screen. Yeah, Keith says, relaxing back on his heels. The hand on Lance's chest slides up to his neck, fingers curling into the hair at Snape. If you think you can keep up. Lance leans forward, grin turning sly and playful. He bumps his forehead against Keith's, noses brushing together as he whispers, breathless and teasing.
Try me, Keithy boy.
Both of them lean into the kiss, two puzzle pieces snapping into place. Behind the camera, Matt Wolf whistles loudly, followed by several loud, high-pitched exclamations of, "Ow, ow, ow, ow! Get some boys!"
Look at my baby brother,
Shiro says off-screen, voice loud and choked, filled with fake tears.
taking third place at regionals and sucking face in the hallway. I'm so proud.
They grew up so fast, Allura cries out just as choked up with dramatic tears. It seems like just yesterday they were sucking face at the studio. Aww, Hunt coos loudly, followed by several more wordless exclamations. Pidge makes loud gagging noises next to him. In the background, people are starting to turn their heads, curious and drawn to the noise that everyone is making. Their gazes settle on Keith and Lance, still lip-locked. Some smile, some look away. Several more whistles and hollers come from somewhere in the crowd. Despite neither of them moving away, their lips can be seen tugging up into hidden smiles. They both let go of each other long enough to flip off the camera, causing a chorus of laughter. End recording.